On a cruise ship, we travel the Baltic Sea along routes that have connected the cultures of the region since ancient times. A journey of discovery in the extraordinary light of a short Nordic summer. This time, our journey takes us to St. Petersburg, to visionary city planners, conservers of the past, big city dwellers with a hankering for nature, and young lovebirds. On our once around the Baltic Sea cruise, the giant ocean liner takes us from Sweden to Finland and Russia, and then on to the Baltic states. Coming from the Gulf of Finland, we'll dock at the quay just outside of St. Petersburg. From the historic Russian Imperial capital to the islands in the Neva Delta, we move on to the periphery, to Petergov, Kronstadt, Komorovo, and then back to the city proper. In the early morning hours, visibility is poor. The channel is very narrow here. The ship has a load draft of 8 meters. If it strayed from its track, it would run aground in the boggy shallows of the Petersburg Bay. The fairway is regularly dredged to prevent the huge container ships and tankers from getting stuck. The margin of error between the reflector posts, fore and aft, is very small indeed. The tug chugs slowly on. While the cruise ship carefully inches along to its next destination, there in St. Petersburg, the day has already begun. Young people in extravagant costumes gather before their daily deployment and then fan out to the city's various tourist spots. Civilians and military people make their way to work, and in front of the State Hermitage Museum, cleaning crews tidy things up. Petersburg gears up for the daily flood of visitors. A mooring maneuver in the early morning fog. The voyagers can't see much of the newly built soccer stadium or anything else at this point. By the time the ship gets the green light for shore leave, the sun has fought its way through. Cruise passengers who've booked an excursion in advance don't need a visa for Russia, but are still not allowed to move about freely in the city. The first stop for many tours, 6 kilometers from the cruise ship port, St. Isaac's Cathedral. When the city was founded more than 300 years ago, Tsar Peter the Great engaged construction specialists from Germany, France, and Italy. A French architect designed the cathedral that stands on a foundation of more than 10,000 tree trunks, which were rammed into the boggy ground here. Because such a gaping church interior is hard to heat and to keep dry, many of the pictures that adorn the interior are not oil paintings but mosaics made of tiny bits of glass in millions of different shades. The highlight of the visit involves an arduous climb up to the edge of the domed ceiling, more than 262 steps up to the colonnades, 43 meters above. On a clear day, This perch offers a spectacular view of the whole city. In the Soviet era, the cathedral served as an anti-religion museum. Since 1990, it has once again been used for church services. The dome is gilded, some say with 400 kilos of real gold and all. Others say 20 kilos is more like it. During the Second World War, the glittering rooftop was camouflaged with a layer of green paint, but was the target of repeated German bombing nonetheless. Nowadays, St. Isaac's is a popular setting for wedding photos. On Saturdays especially, it's a hive of prenup activity. Photographer Viktor Loginov had a booking with a couple, and he knew exactly what he would propose. Today we'll first shoot at St. Isaac's Cathedral, maybe up on the observation platform too, depending on the mood of our couple. Then we'll probably go out to Vasilyevsky Island, where we can take some panorama shots. Then maybe to a park, and then on to the registry office to take a few shots with the wedding guests. After that, they can manage without me. People are always getting married, and some years the numbers may be down, but basically, it's a constant. I think getting married is a good thing. It's a beautiful tradition, and of course, a momentous celebration in a person's life. Living a dull life is no good. Celebrations, parties. Being cheerful, that's good. And a wedding is a great occasion. The divorce rate in Russia is high. It's said, tongue-in-cheek, that the reason so many couples split up is so that they can enjoy another wedding party. Sometimes the session is so spirited that the bride pops the buttons on her gown. I think that a little wedding photo session is something everyone can afford. It's important for me that the young people don't try to act their emotions. They should behave naturally. That's very important. I can then find the right angle and capture the emotional moments. They shouldn't be thinking about how they'll look in the pictures. They should just be themselves. That's why I talk a lot with the couples, try to help them to relax, feel comfortable, and then I try to make lovely, natural photos. For the happiest day of their lives, some couples choose to be pictured in front of a war monument, like this obelisk on Victory Square. It's a memorial to the almost 3-year-long German Wehrmacht blockade of what was then Leningrad during the Second World War, a war atrocity that cost the lives of more than 1 million residents of the city. But Anastasia and Igor choose to go to the river, to the Neva, the source of St. Petersburg itself. Another of the many rituals that still accompany Russian weddings. Around the year 1700, Tsar Peter had the city built on 42 islands in the Neva Delta. At its center, he wanted not a palace, but an admiralty, headquarters for naval officers, and a shipyard. He himself had trained as a shipwright with a Dutch shipbuilder and felt the future lay in maritime trade. Thousands of serfs toiled here to erect a settlement in the swamp. Many of them didn't survive the punishing work. The new city was modeled on Venice. The main arteries crisscrossing St. Petersburg would not be streets, but canals. The Tsar expected the residents to learn to cross them with sailboats, and initially refused to have bridges built. Nowadays, a ride on one of the flat river barges that ply the city's numerous waterways is more or less a must. Every year, around 7.5 million travelers visit St. Petersburg. And some of the now plentiful bridges, more than 580 in all, it said, are so low that, depending on water levels, the swamp barges can just barely pass underneath. Because St. Petersburg is built on wetlands, the construction of the new subway system in 1940 proved especially tricky. They had to dig down 100 meters deep before reaching ground solid enough to build on. That's why Pita, as the locals call their city, has one of the deepest subterranean transport networks in the world, so it takes some time to get down to your train. The individual stations were envisioned as proud palaces for the people. Bronze wall reliefs depict events from the Russian Revolution. The metro transports thousands of people minute for minute, as long as the system stays on schedule. But when trains start running late, things can get dicey as passengers keep arriving on the overcrowded platforms. Then it's time for the alert ladies at the foot of the escalator to take decisive action. Flipping a switch, the direction changes, and it's up, up, and away.
I think that's an interesting thing.
This one piece will make 52 layers.
Watch on mobile devices or the big screen. All for free. No subscription required.
At many stations, there are improvised farmers' markets. Private individuals selling the produce from their own garden or the flowers from their own balcony pots. These stands are actually illegal, but are tolerated. Most of the sellers here are pensioners with barely 200 euros a month to live on. They need to earn something on the side just to get by. Anastasia Rabkova is one of them, a babushka, as they say, a granny.
It started in the 90s when suddenly we had to struggle just to survive. We had to earn extra money just to buy a piece of soap. The children were small then, but things never changed, and now we're stuck doing this work. We know we can only rely on ourselves. We can't rely on the state. Only on ourselves. The whole family pitches in. My husband and the kids harvest the produce, and I sell it here. You have to earn something. My pension is 100 euros. You can't live on that. It's tough. I don't want to work anywhere else now. I'm old, and we're used to this now. Our grandparents survived the same way with their own hard work. They kept bees. That was in the 70s, and back then my grandfather, God rest his soul, said, "Granddaughter, you won't make it on wages alone. You have to earn something on the side," and we do. But always honestly.
Many had worked hard their whole life in the Petersburg shipyards, or for the weapons industry so central to the Russian economy, yet their pension still falls short. The port of St. Petersburg is a key economic factor for the whole region, just as it was in Tsar Peter's day. Alexei Onatsko used his savings to buy an old Dutch cutter and, together with friends, made it shipshape again. The photographer was one of the first private citizens to risk navigating the municipal waters in his own boat. The vast network of rivers and canals connects the entire city to the Baltic Sea. But the seacoast itself is reserved mainly for outlying industrial facilities. I'll first get us past the bridge and then I'll tell you more, okay? The tide is very high and I'm a bit nervous. This here is an old harbor for galleys. It goes back to the time of Peter the Great. The harbor was man-made, designed by Domenico Trezzini, the same architect who built the Peter and Paul fortress. The water is high, but I hope we'll make it through. That's a temporary bridge, and it's very low. Alexei and his barge are dependent on the tides. There's smooth sailing here at low tide, but now, just before the peak high water, it's a tight squeeze. We were lucky. That was tight. The harbor police stopped me once before I even had my sailing license. It was my birthday, and we had just finished refurbishing the ship, and we're taking it out for a little maiden voyage. Of course, there was wine involved. Anyway, a police boat came racing right over. They'd never seen us before, and we totally panicked. How do you stop this thing anyway? So they came on board, said hello, wanted to know what we were up to. License, please. And I said, I don't have it yet. I'm still doing the course. Here's the proof. Smells like wine here. It's my birthday. Look at my ID. So then they just wished us a good trip and said they'd be back in 2 weeks to check my new license. That was it. No problem. But most people know nothing about it. They think it's very hard to pass the test for a license to be able to man a boat here, but that's not true. You just have to really want it. Many St. Petersburgers aren't even aware that they live in a coastal city. When you begin at the beginning, Petersburg exists because of the access to the Baltic Sea. That was the actual reason for building a city here. Most locals don't even know that Petersburg is a seaport city. Everyone loves the rivers running through the city center, but the seaside part of town is unknown to many. The Gulf of Finland, the sea. Very few here know it. It was always very inaccessible, which is only just changing now, and people are starting to realize we have a sea at our doorstep. This is Sevkabel Port. Here we are already. Alexei Onutsko is taking us to see a former factory that's being converted into a cultural center, thanks to his initiative. We're here at the Sevkabel port, where we're now busy turning a cable factory into a public venue. The factory has been relocated, and the premises here are now open to the citizens of the city. There will be many different things on offer: space for concerts, studios for artists, a museum, cafes and restaurants, music clubs. That's all being created here now. The entrance area is already finished. It looks like a sluice gate.
Это площадка для мероприятий, то есть мы сейчас находимся на центральной улице. Вот здесь.
This is the main street of the former plant. That's the factory hall where they manufactured undersea power cables. Now you can access the sea from here.
Туда сходим. Вот корабли,
Look,
море. Там
ships.
мы сделали набережную.
The ocean.
То есть раньше
We've redesigned the whole docklands area. Used to be, city residents couldn't even go there. Now they can. The boardwalk here used to be a real rubbish heap.
В общем-то, свалка.
Only very recently has it become a place where you can stroll along, looking out to sea.
И новая пешеходная набережная. с
People
видом на
now
море.
come here every day, and in the evening too.
Каждый вечер и день наполняется людьми. Вот, вы это сможете завтра увидеть.
Construction work is still underway. The electric cable factory once located here has relocated and is now financing the conversion of the former industrial site.
Да, привет, милая.
Alexei and his colleagues have invested a lot of their own hard work into turning the old manufacturing halls into a concert hall.
Около 8 месяцев мы потратили, наверное, то, что
We spent a long time renovating this. It took us 8 months.
производству катушек для
This
кабеля.
factory used to manufacture electrical cable, and now it's a popular Petersburg concert venue.
Делаем тут разные события. Довольно бурная активность.
It's developing like crazy. Everyone's happy, and even the municipal government is paying close attention to what we're doing. They see it as a pilot project to use as a model.
Должны тоже делать, как бы, и вот они
They're
смотрят.
scouting around now for other possibilities for collaboration.
Пути взаимодействия, думаю,
They're looking at other municipal grounds that could be reinvented in a similar way.
и соединены в
All
какую-то
that
систему, идею.
could create a new awareness for a new era in Petersburg.
Здесь
There's a lot going on Vasilyevsky Island and throughout the city,
Вот это
and we're a sign of these positive changes.
для города.
Another area of the wharf complex, a bit further out, was made to harbor cruise ships. Space for up to 14 giant ocean liners a day in the shadow of the iconic Gazprom corn cob. As yet, still a vision, 4 big tubs is the current maximum capacity. The food on board is good, and St. Petersburg too is known for its many culinary temptations, so many take the occasion to get in some serious fitness. Or indulge in a wellness treatment. At 4 p.m. sharp, in the belly of the cruise beast, the moment of truth. Galley chef Abubakar Al-Habo musters his kitchen staff and inspects the dishes that will be presented to guests for dinner at 6 p.m.
So, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening, chef. How are you? Good.
He doesn't just try them himself, the whole team samples the wares, and they all evaluate the results together. Collective taste assessment.
Beef consomme served with vegetables and pasta. And then for the next
A key
one,
feature of teamwork in the large commercial kitchen operation, each should feel that their own expertise counts.
all right, good. Also the brown sauce. Very good. After 8, huh?
Besonders wichtig ist natürlich ein Faktor
Respect is an especially important factor. Only when there's mutual respect, with a smile, with a little joke or some small talk, can you work well as a team, create a nice environment and be successful.
Zusammenarbeiten, dann auch ein angenehmes Umfeld schaffen und dann auch erfolgreich sein. Denn nur
Pressure alone doesn't work. Then they'll all stand at attention. But to maintain high performance for 4 to 6 or 9 months for that, well,
das geht nur, wenn
motivation plays a very big role.
spielt da eine sehr, sehr große Rolle, dass die Jungs auch am Ball
To keep the guys on their toes, enjoying the work with fun, passion, and love, then our guests love the taste. 2,700 passengers on board means a minimum of 10,000 to 15,000 meals. Then there's the crew that needs to eat too. That's another 1,000 people, which brings us to over 3,500. And that adds up to a good 12 to 15,000 meals a day. Because some people like to eat more than 2 or 3 times a day. Busboys deliver the trays carrying the food directly to the various restaurants. Also via escalator 1 story down. There, the waiters take over and deliver the food to table. Unlike many other cruise ships, ours did not offer a buffet. Everyone is served at their seat. That's personnel intensive, which is reflected in the costs, and in turn, the cruise price tag. It's really nice to hear it when they like the food. You can see it in their face that they like it. You get a kick out of that. In the Gulf of Finland, 30 kilometers outside of the city, lies Gotland Island. All cruise ships pass by here on arrival. 300 years ago, Tsar Peter set up a strategic stronghold here to prevent enemy vessels from entering the Neva Bay off St. Petersburg. Peppering the sea offshore from Gotland are 21 little forts erected on man-made islands. In winter, holes were bored in the ice and filled with huge amounts of sand, which provided the foundation for the ever larger fortresses that were built over time. Gotland itself is the site of Kronstadt, a military base, with its Russian Orthodox naval cathedral. The cross atop its dome served as a sea mark, visible to incoming mariners from a distance of 30 kilometers. Until 1996, Kronstadt was a restricted zone and only accessible via the water. About 20 kilometers away, on the south coast of the Gulf of Finland, is the site Peter the Great chose for his summer residence, Peterhof, the court of Peter. Here in the early 18th century, he thus created a luxurious refuge well away from the gates of the city. Inspired by the French forerunner in Versailles, he commissioned the construction of a magnificent palace grounds featuring 140 fountains. Still the world's largest assembly of its kind. Our day's excursion had begun in the historic center of St. Petersburg and then took us to the docklands on the edge of town. After that, we went on to Peterhof and Kronstadt. We would now continue on to the Dacha settlement of Komarovo. The entire Neva Bay off of St. Petersburg is managed by an ecologically controversial dam and a series of sluice gates. Because the city itself lies at a scant 2 to 4 meters above sea level and used to be visited by devastating floods almost every year. Atop the safeguarding dam runs the 142-kilometer-long high-speed ring road, past Europe's now tallest building and new St. Petersburg landmark. Many of its 5 million residents have a traditional refuge on the outskirts. Their dacha, a modest antidote to the air pollution and the often crowded accommodations in the city. In the Soviet era, the dacha gardens provided 90% of the fruit and vegetables consumed locally, and dacha produce still covers over a third of those needs. In return for meritorious service, Peter the Great gifted certain noblemen with land on which to build a summer house. So began the iconic Russian dacha culture, which still thrives today. Komarovo, the mosquito colony, abundant forest, and a bit of private garden agriculture. A place that has hosted prominent writers and even Nobel Prize winners in its time. The Dacha is an important place for me. It's my home, a place where I can enjoy quiet solitude and concentrate on my work. When my grandfather was still alive, many famous people came to visit him here. The poet Joseph Brodsky. He lived near the Dacha of Anna Akhmatova and came around here to discuss this and that with my grandpa. Anna Akhmatova was here too. So the Dacha also reminds me of meeting all of these famous people. And I try to keep the tradition alive. I invite authors, renowned scientists here, show them the Dacha. We talk, sit together and drink tea, share a meal, live the Dacha life. Our host is writer and university literature lecturer Andrei Astvadzaturov, who's mainly a weekend and vacation time resident of the mosquito colony. There are so many mosquitoes here because the swamp is right nearby. Whole clouds of pests, especially in June. That's quite unpleasant. And then there's always something that needs repairing. But it feels completely different doing those little odd jobs here. You do it for yourself. You keep the house in good shape for your own well-being, for your own quality of life. The house is old. It's like caring for an elderly relative. That's the feeling. Of course, you have to earn a living. You have your obligations, but this is something very special. Most of the buildings in the settlement were built during the Soviet era and made available to worthy artists and scientists. Andrei, too, comes here regularly to work, at his desk, on his novels and other texts, often handwritten. I prefer it. When you type, you think differently. I can type a book review or some kind of report for the university directly into the computer, business documents. But creative work, I have to write by hand. Many things here are different than in the city. Fresh air. Petersburg isn't the dirtiest city in Russia, but it's not very clean either. Living there is hard because you constantly have the feeling you should be working. And here you have the feeling you should always be relaxing. Although you work just as much here, but you're surrounded by pine trees, the air is good, and the sun shines through. It feels like vacation, although you're working. I think that's the most significant difference between the Dacha and life in the city.
Ощущение, что ты все время отдыхаешь, хотя ты при этом работаешь. Мне кажется, вот это как бы самый такой важный момент, ну, как бы отделяющий дачу от города.
Nowadays, rich business people are increasingly taking a keen interest in these little country estates. Back in the city, with its eventful history and frequent name changes. First it was called Petersburg, then Petrograd, then Leningrad, and then back to St. Petersburg. The city of Pushkin, Gogol, Dostoevsky, Stravinsky, and Shostakovich. An imposing metropolis with 500 noble palaces, the famous Nevsky Prospect, one of the world's longest shopping streets, an Art Nouveau department store, the socialist legacy, and a vibrancy that seems almost Mediterranean, at least in summertime. But the first snows often come in November, and then the city is utterly transformed. The canals freeze over, snow lies thick on the ground, temperatures are icy, and people are happy to find a warm and cozy refuge. For example, in the Rio Mochnayas, vodka rooms, often to be found in walk-down venues on popular streets. I'll have a green brand, please, and bread and butter with ham.
И бутерброд Скорее.
Intellectuals and literary figures have long been partial to these little hideaways, which offer a quiet place right in the middle of town, where you can think and be left alone, don't have to talk to anyone, yet still be in the company of others.
Спасибо большое.
And that's exactly why publicist Lev Laurier, a real connoisseur of the scene, comes here. For our film shoot, he pretended to drink vodka, but it was only water. In the Rio Mochnaya, toasts aren't usually raised. The nice thing here is the anonymity, like being alone in the masses of a big city. You don't know anyone. That's why you don't stay long. You come in from the cold, drink a glass, and then leave. A vodka room is a place for solitary people. For a person in the north who has a tough time of it in the city, it's windy and it's rainy, it snows, to be able to nip in somewhere to warm up is a real pleasure.
Ветер, снег, дождь. Где просто зайти и погреться, это уже само по себе удовольствие.
That's why people from all social strata go to the Rio Mochnaya.
Классово, я бы сказал.
Vodka used to be sold at a cheap standard price, and even now, a serving of 100 grams still doesn't cost much more than €1. Of course, a really expensive vodka is softer, purified multiple times. But still, vodka is like bread. It's hard to ruin it. It's a very standardized product. Vodka rooms don't have a very long history. It's more a Soviet tradition than a Russian one. In Russia, it was forbidden to sell servings of vodka at a bar. You had to buy a bottle. That's why drunks bought a bottle, broke off the neck, and started drinking it right there next to the shop. In the Soviet Union, they first fought against alcoholism and later for a cultivated consumption of alcohol. That is, you can drink, but not too much. And always with sakuska, a little snack to soak it up. The classic little snacks are bread and butter with ham, or pickled eggs, dill pickles, marinated mushrooms, or herring. It's all about a good, solid basis. People don't get sloshed in a vodka room. That's not looked well upon. And there's always a lady of the house who is both stern and friendly. The people come because she's friendly, but she also has to be stern because hard alcohol is being consumed. That can lead to all sorts of things that you have to be able to deal with. The Neva, a mere 74 kilometers long, is one of Europe's most water-rich rivers. To enable trade goods to be shipped from the country's interior to the Petersburg seaport, all the bridges are drawn at night, as they were in days gone by. And cheating husbands had, or have, an excuse for not making it back home last night. Also, during the white nights at the end of June, then different districts can be cut off from each other for up to several hours. If you haven't made it home or back to your hotel by then, you can either wait out the flood or plunge into the city's nightlife. Although in midsummer, it barely gets dark at night anyway. Not till the wee hours are the bridges let down again, and traffic resumes its flow. Petersburg, the city of uprisings and revolutions, the assassination of Tsar Alexander II, the Petersburg Bloody Sunday, the February Revolution. In October 1917, Bolsheviki subdued the Tsarist battleship Aurora on the Neva. The thunderous sound of cannon fire from the battleship that still lies on the river today signaled the start of the October Revolution, the storming of the Winter Palace. Cannons were also fired from the Peter and Paul fortress. The Bolsheviki attempted to penetrate the seat of government in the Hermitage, demanding peace and the abolition of large-scale landholding. The popular understanding of these events stems mainly from the images of one film, Sergei Eisenstein's silent classic, October, 10 Days That Shook the World, a myth that has captured the public imagination. The Hermitage, the former palatial residence of the Tsar, was not only government headquarters at the time, but also served as a military hospital.
In 1915, this vast hall was full of hospital beds. The First World War was raging, and there weren't enough hospitals in Petrograd. When the revolution began, during the night of October 25th, about 100 wounded still lay here in the makeshift hospital. And when the Winter Palace eventually came under fire from the Peter and Paul fortress, the hospital here was hit. And the revolutionaries knew there was a hospital in here. They tried to avoid targeting the Nikolaev Hall because the wounded were common foot soldiers. The Soviet leadership never mentioned the fact that during the storming of the Winter Palace, the Bolsheviki had in fact shot at injured regular soldiers. We've only recently found that out.
Yelena Solomacha is a curator at the Hermitage. With almost 3 million artworks, one of the largest museum collections in the world, Empress Catherine the Great had laid the foundation for it back in her day. When the people stormed the palace, the exhibits were no longer there. They had already been brought to safety. In Eisenstein's film, the revolutionaries stormed the grand staircase of the Winter Palace and searched the 1,500 rooms for members of the hated government. A distorted representation of history, explains Yelena.
We all remember Eisenstein's masterpiece, October, when a massive horde of soldiers and sailors comes swarming up the Jordan staircase. It looks very impressive, but in fact, the whole thing played out right here. If you think about the armed masses coming up the stairs with Antonov Ovseyenko leading the charge, you have to ask, how did they even know where their provisional government sat? The Winter Palace is enormous, and there are so many entrances. And when the soldiers arrived, they had no idea where to go. They first went into other halls. They found the Junkers and arrested them, and they were the ones to point the Bolsheviki in the right direction, to the little dining room that the whole revolutionary mob eventually stormed.
But in Eisenstein's film, the propaganda version of the revolution as per Stalin, no one roams aimlessly down long, dark corridors in search of the right room. No. The screen version shows a more fulminant turn of events.
The armed soldiers and sailors came in here, the Arabsky Hall, to this door. There stood a Junker who said he was prepared to defend the room to the last drop of his blood, and that he couldn't let anyone in because the government was in there. But it was obvious that he couldn't keep the masses at bay. It's actually quite a small hall, by no means the most representative or the most beautiful here in the Winter Palace. But you can't help thinking that events that occurred right here turned the world on its head. It's interesting to note that the Russians still take these events very personally, not as history, because it did affect every single family in one way or another. People suddenly found themselves on one side or the other, and it all started here, in this room. My own two grandmothers had completely contrary views of the revolution, and that divided the family. One was very proud of being a noblewoman. The other always crossed that out on her documents.
Despite all the historical significance, the patina and memories of revolution and wars, Petersburg is a vibrant, booming city, exemplified by the new arenas built for the 2018 Soccer World Cup. When an American investor built the first high-rise here 100 years ago, its 6 stone stories could not be taller than the Winter Palace. To get around the restriction, the entrepreneur simply topped it off with a glass tower and a globe. The whole city is full of overhead wires, electricity for buses, for streetlights, to supply individual houses, telephone cables, a virtual spider's web of wiring above St. Petersburg. Early evening. The morning's comic book characters are now warmed up and giving it their all, especially at touristic hotspots like out in front of the Hermitage. It turned out they're not just there to entertain, give hugs and pose for selfies with the international crowds. They're there to collect donations for children's charities. Back to the Baltic seashore, just outside the city. There at the quay, the giant ocean liners await the return of their passengers from shore leave. Our ship would be leaving St. Petersburg before sundown. On board, a musical troupe was already rehearsing for the evening's performance. The typical cruise ship performer is a triple threat, able to sing, dance, and act. Some of them have a classical training and find their first professional engagement in the travel industry. The current troupe, all from England or the US, had already been on board for 6 months running, with no home leave. It's especially challenging in the beginning when you first go to sea, as Catherine Dennison reports. What's different about being in a show aboard ship?
So the biggest difference is the sea, because obviously on land you don't have rough sea or anything like that. So that's been the biggest struggle for me, because I was actually really seasick at the beginning of this contract. And right before one of our shows, I was actually in the bathroom 2 minutes before going on stage, and I was throwing up. But our dance captain was really good, and he was ready to consider whatever I said. So he actually asked me, Catherine, are you okay? Are you going to be able to do the show? And for a second I was like, I genuinely don't know, because I was physically throwing up. But then I was like, no, there's no business like show business, and the show must go on. So I had to get out there and do it, and that's what I did. So, but that's the hardest thing, and the biggest difference, I think, the movements and not always being sure if your foot is actually going to go to where you want it to go, because you never know when the ship's going to move. This is actually my first time working on a cruise ship, or even being on a cruise ship at all. So I think it's really nice to have my first contract on one of the smaller ships, because here we get to, you know, we see all the crew all the time. So it's kind of more like a family than like work colleagues, if you would say that. You know, you become really close with people, and they become your family more than just people that you work with, which is really nice. My dream from I've been a little girl is to always do something with performing, which I'm really lucky to do now and get paid for. Like sometimes I have to pinch myself, and now I'm traveling the world, and it's absolutely amazing to, I've always worked really hard to get where I am, so I feel like even though other people may not think that it's difficult what we do, in order to get here and to do what we do, it's not easy. And I think a lot of people forget that sometimes. So I feel like it's really rewarding to do something that you've always dreamed of and actually get paid for it, you know? It's really amazing. So So it's nice.
It was quiet on board that night, the passengers exhausted from 2 active days in St. Petersburg, jam-packed with adventurous excursions and experiences to remember. As always, nighttime was used to set out to high sea, making course for the next destination, which we were scheduled to reach in the early morning hours, the port of Tallinn in Estonia.